Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is John Musella, and I'm representing the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce. First and foremost, we'd like to thank you all for celebrating our honorees with us at our 10th annual Salute to Patriots. We felt it was important to continue this tradition despite the pandemic we're living through. In partnership with the City of Santa Clarita and in collaboration with the Santa Clarita Veterans Collaborative, we worked on a format which still allows us to recognize our community's veterans. This year, we are pleased to honor 5 outstanding veterans and business community leaders. Today, we're pleased to honor Jeffrey Stabile. During the Vietnam War, Jeff served 4 years in the U.S. Air Force, 22nd Bomb Wing, 15th Air Force, as an aviation technician supporting B-52 bombers and KC-135 tankers. He participated in several flight missions ferrying F-4 Phantom jet fighters from the West Coast to Guam and to the Philippines for forwarding to Vietnam. When he was deciding on what branch of service, Jeff knew he wanted to come away with the skills he could use in civilian life, and ironically, after his service, Jeff spent the next 50-plus years of his life buying and selling commercial aircraft and aircraft parts in the worldwide aviation aftermarket. Jeff moved to the Santa Clarita Valley in 1979 with his wife, Peggy, and 2 children. In 1988, Jeff and his wife formed the nonprofit Santa Clarita chapter of PFLAG, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. This organization provides support for the LGBTQ community and conducts monthly meetings as well as outreach programs. In 2018, at the suggestion of his wife, Jeff started to volunteer at the Santa Clarita Veterans Services Collaborative. This nonprofit is a collection of businessmen and women, companies, and individuals who donate their time and service to veterans, active duty military, and their families who reside in the SCV. These services include, but are not limited to, housing, employment, training, education, legal, financial, health, dental, and home care. Congratulations to you, Jeff.
My name is Jeff Stabile, and I'd like to express my appreciation to the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, to the City of Santa Clarita and the Santa Clarita Veterans Services Collaborative for producing the 10th annual Salute to Patriots, and also for selecting me to be one of this year's honorees. A while ago, one of my grandsons asked me, why did I go into the military? And I'd never really thought about it before. And I remember that graduating high school in the early 60s, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. No idea. My dad wanted me to go to college, but I told him I wasn't ready. And I was looking around at job opportunities, and then I started thinking about the military. And I thought, wait a minute, this would be a good way to serve my country. So I looked around and I selected the Air Force. Reason being that I thought there were going to be some great opportunities in the Air Force for some training that I could possibly transfer and use in civilian life. So I looked at the different categories, and I decided missile maintenance would be the area that I'd like to go into, because in the 60s, missiles were the thing. But those schools were closed, so it looks like all the other people that were going in the Air Force were going in missile maintenance. So I got my second option, which was jet engine technician. Now, I really enjoyed the time in the Air Force because it allowed me to find out who I was, what my capabilities were. I got to work with some very good people. I learned a great skill that I could transfer to my civilian life. And there was structure and regulations that an 18, 19-year-old needed at the time, specifically I did. And I felt that I accomplished something each day that I was in. I have a couple of interesting memories. One was, it was on a Friday night. I was called to come out and run up a B-52 bomber to full takeoff power so the crew chief could check out some systems on the aircraft. Now, B-52 has 8 engines. So it was a damp night. I get out there, and in the early 60s, at March, we had no noise attenuation apparatus on the engines, and those basically would dampen the sound coming out of the exhaust pipe. Also, when a B-52 takes off, it needs an additional boost just as it's taking off to get it up in the air. They use what they call a water injection system, and basically they inject distilled water into the front compressor of the engine, which sends a signal to the fuel control, I need more fuel because I got thicker air, and it adds about 1,000 pounds of thrust to the engine just for a very short time. So I start moving each engine up to takeoff power, and when I get all 8 engines set up, I lock in the throttles, and I reach down and I hit the water injection switch. And the aircraft literally goes, it's like it takes a breath and jumps forward. And the noise was just absolutely deafening. The cockpit is bouncing, the tires are rocking up and down on the chocks, the dampness of the air is magnifying the sound. It is just rocking and rolling, and you're sitting in this cockpit, and the feeling is just unbelievable. Just unbelievable, all this power going on. The other thing that I remember was my first task force. Each month, sometimes a couple times a month, 15 KC-135 tankers, which are basically Boeing 707s without windows, would come into March, and then 30 F-4 Phantom fighters would go into Travis Air Force Base in Northern California. And this would happen over a weekend, starting Friday through Sunday. And then on Monday morning, the tankers would take off at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the fighters would take off. And they would rendezvous over the Pacific. And there would be 2 fighters on the wings of each tanker. And we'd ferry them from the West Coast to Hawaii, from Hawaii to Guam. And generally, tankers in Okinawa would pick up the aircraft out of Guam unless there were weather, and then we would take them on to the Philippines. But during the flight, of course, the fighters have to be refueled. So when that got time, the boom operator would go to the back of the aircraft, and he'd lay down on this cushion, and there were windows and a yoke, and there were 2 observer panels. And he would connect his headset with the pilot, and he'd get the boom set out, and the fighter would leave one wing, and he'd come down underneath the aircraft, hook himself up, refuel, break away, go back in position. Then the other fighter would come up, come down, hook up, refuel, take off, and go back up. And when we're laying there, we can see right into the cockpit of the fighter. We can see the pilot. And this is all happening at 25,000 feet. It's just a great picture, just a great picture. And this happened numerous times as we were taking them over to Guam. My military experience really did affect my career, my life afterwards. I remember when I was discharged, I was married and had a child. We came back, and as I started looking for a job, and many of you will realize and remember this, you had to go through the classified section of a newspaper and look through and place some calls to try and get an interview. So I was on the phone with this one aircraft repair company, and I was explaining what my background was and what I did in the military. And he interrupted me and just said, "Just come out and fill out the paperwork." It's the first time I ever got a job over the phone like that. So I worked there for a little while, and was with some other company, and then one day I read in the paper an interesting ad. So I called. They didn't point me to have an interview. Went out, and this company was in the aviation aftermarket business. I had no idea what that was. And they explained that the airlines around the world will come to them and buy parts because they're less expensive than from the manufacturer. They're all reconditioned, FAA certified, so everything is fine. Or the manufacturer couldn't deliver on time. Well, as we were talking during the interview, I knew all the parts he was talking about. I knew what they looked like. I knew the function. I knew where they went on the airplane. We went on the warehouse. I could point them out sitting on the shelves. So it just fit like a glove. And for the next 48 years, I traveled to 40 different countries, sometimes numerous times, buying and selling parts to the airlines, negotiating agreements and contracts. And I got to see the entire world. And all of this was because of my 4 years of experience in the Air Force. Remember, I talked about the B-52 and running it up. After that run up on Friday night, the following Monday, we received the directive. And the directive said there will be no more running of engines from 9 p.m. on Friday until 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday. I had apparently disturbed something that was going on. So in the shop, we looked at this directive and said, okay, that's what we'll do. About 2 weeks later, I get a call to come out on a Saturday, and one of these task force tankers was having a problem with the water injection system. And the crew chief and I talked, and we decided the best thing to do is run up the aircraft, pressurize the system, see if there are any leaks or any malfunctions anywhere. So start up the engine, put it up to full power, hit water injection. Crew chief couldn't see anything, pulled it out of water injection, was about to go in again, and I look out the front of the cockpit, and coming across the tarmac is this blue van with his yellow emergency light flashing. And he comes racing up to the aircraft, jumps out, and gives me the shut-off signal. Well, I had brought the engine back to idle when I saw him coming. He came up the stairs to the cockpit and he said, "You can't run engines on the weekend. We've got a directive. You can't do this." And I said, "Okay, I'll be more than happy to shut down and leave. If you just go tell the captain of this tanker that he's not going to be able to complete his task force mission Monday morning because we weren't allowed to run engines on the weekend." And he looked at me, and there was a pause. And then he said, "Well, just get it done as quickly as you can." And I just nodded, smiled, and that was an interesting time. Again, I want to thank everybody for the honor of being selected as one of the Patriots to salute. So again, thank you very much.